This class is to discuss basic music theory and to give us an idea of what some of the general terms are used, what they mean, and to give us a bit of an understanding of some of these common foundations on which the entire theory of music is based. So to begin with, what is sound? Well, sound could be considered many things. It is a resonant vibration that has an auditory component. And so sound really means the auditory aspect of vibrational energy that can be heard by the human ear. Now we know that the human ear has a range of hearing which is somewhat limited. It is from around 20 Hertz to 20,000 Hertz. However, many animals can hear lower ranges of frequency as well as higher ranges of frequency. And so we know that the spectrum of sound is actually much louder, much larger than what we as human beings are capable of perceiving. What's interesting about sound is that if we were able to hear the full scope, the sound would be almost infinite. The sound on its lower hertz becomes more of a kinesthetic vibration where the sound is felt rather than heard when it comes to human beings. But when we produce a sound, when a sound is produced by striking an instrument or really any given thing that produces a sound is produced by things rubbing on one another, generally friction of one or more instruments or objects on other things, then what is created is what we call a fundamental tone, as well as usually many different vibrational and auditory over and undertones. Now, depending on what the instrument is or what the object is, they may be auditory, they may be able to be perceived by our human ears. And if there are harmonic overtones, then they are actually extending to infinity on either side of the fundamental tone, in which case the sound is in harmonic intervals, which means that it proportional mathematically all the way to infinity, the sound would be perceived in these different harmonic overtones, and similarly in the undertones they could be perceived if we were capable of hearing below 20 Hertz, which we are not. Some animals will hear some of them for a longer period than we will. What we as humans will notice is that we start to feel them in our bodies. Now, the reason why sound is considered to be so healing, capable of shifting and moving frequency and shifting energy within us as human beings, is because of these harmonic over and undertones that are expanding and extending out into infinity. These days, modern day music that we hear, when we hear recorded music, is actually cutting off all of the harmonic overtones and putting them into what we would consider a format that is capable of being heard by the human ear. So this is kind of the MP3 format, where a selection of the fundamental tones and the harmonic overtones are selected and kept in a recorded musical piece, and the rest are discarded. And so when we listen to recorded music, unless it's been recorded in a certain way, the wave type recording means that we are not actually receiving the full spectrum of the harmonic overtones. And that's why in-person sound being received is so much more powerful, because of all those harmonic overtones that are present. So sound is really, it is many things. It is a feeling, it is a perception, it is a sensation of auditory vibration. Now, music. What is music? And how is it different from sound? Well, music is sound, obviously, but music is actually organized sound. And so when we say it is organized sound, it's usually organized in a way in which the human ear would recognize different intervals and different relationships between the notes that are pleasing to the ear, usually. Not always, however, depending on the type or genre of music or how it's being played, the intention behind the music. Music itself is said to be comprised of pitch, melody, and rhythm. And so these three aspects are what contribute to what we would consider the framework of music. And so pitch is referring to the tone that is present. So tone really means the specific pitch of any given sound. So where that musical note is beginning. The melody is now where the specific pitch of the music goes. So that music is not just one sustained tone or one sustained pitch. Pitch and tone can also almost be used interchangeably in that sense. So melody means where does the pitch go? How does the music unfold? What is the arrangement of notes? And how does that play together? And again, it's about the relationship between the notes, the intervals between the different musicality that really create a feeling. And then that is combined with rhythm, which gives a tempo and a certain dance to the music, a certain potential beat or a timing that is rhythmical and somewhat repetitive and allows our ears to catch phrases of music. When pitch, melody, and rhythm are combined together, and we can see how those three things are, the combinations of pitch, melody, and rhythm are almost infinite. And this is why musical songs and sound pieces are always new, that we are always hearing new explorations of these three aspects coming together. And so it is so infinite and so spontaneous and creative that we could spend a lifetime listening to different pieces, that there will be thousands and thousands of years of different pieces of music arising, and many, many, many thousands of years more of all these amazing combinations of pitch, melody, and rhythm that we've never experienced yet to date. And so this is something to consider in our own musicality of what it is to become creative and to become a channel for music to flow through us, is to recognize that there are so many sounds and combinations of sounds, combinations of pitch, melody, and rhythm coming together that will be absolutely unique, that spring through us because we are all hearing things in different ways and able to express what we're hearing in different ways as well. Within music, we refer to the idea of these different pitches of different tones as notes. Now, the notes really are just the letter names that are given to these tones within the Western musical form. And so they are generally starting at A and coming towards G. So we have A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and then we start again at A, B, and again we'll work our way up. And so the notes are giving the framework of these tones that have been organized within the Western musical system. And what reference we have from which to gather and use these notes now is what is referred to as the chromatic scale. The chromatic scale refers to all of the available notes within Western music and that encompass the entirety of the musical scale that is available. So that includes all of those notes I've just mentioned. However, those are what we would refer to as whole tones. And we also have half tones, in which case we start to see sharps and flats being added as well. So the entirety of the chromatic scale is actually a little bit larger, and it would start at A and then move to A sharp, which is also referred to as B flat, to B, and then to C sharp, also referred to as D flat, to D, to D sharp, also referred to as E flat, to E, to F sharp, also known as G flat, to G sharp, and this is also referred to as A flat. So we see that the entirety of these letter names that are given to the tones within Western music also have this component of potential sharps or flats, and that entirety of all of this is referred to as the chromatic scale. Now, we would never really have a piece of music that involves all of those notes. The chromatic scale is almost like thinking about the keyboard of a computer, and that the entirety of the alphabet of our Western language of 52 letters is there on the keyboard. So it is all of the available letters that are able to be used to comprise any sentence, any word, any phrase, any piece of poetry or prose. And so it is the framework within which we are using, within which we are working. And so this is what we refer to as the chromatic scale. It doesn't actually indicate a musical scale of a particular genre within any given type of music or cultural musicality. It just refers to that entirety of the framework from which we are able to then choose different notes. Now, how we choose different notes starts to depend on the arrangement of these different scales. So a scale is referred to as a specific group of notes that has its own style and its own feel. And there are two really important ones to understand, and these most important scales are referred to as the major scale and the minor scale. And so they are very simple and easy to remember in that way. The major scale is a group of notes that has a very bright, light, and upbeat feeling, while the minor scale is a group of notes that is more contemplative. It is slightly moody, downbeat. It has kind of a broody feel to it. And so I'll play an example of the difference in two scales here and see how you hear the difference in the A scale. So that is the A major scale. Now, if I play the A minor scale, you'll hear the difference. It'll be slightly more moody. And so the major and minor scale are very commonly used scales from which we can understand. And they are a pattern of whole and half notes that give this bright and light, happy feel for the major scale, or this kind of moody, broody, sensitive melancholy feeling for the minor scale. Now, the term key, often we hear, what key is it in? The key of this piece or this song is the key of C or G or A or whatever it is. And generally what that means is that the key is referring to the starting note of the scale within which that particular song or piece of music is created. And what that means is usually a term that is interchanged between musicians so that people can understand within what scale we are working in order to be able to improvise different melodies over the piece of music that someone is doing. So it means that someone who might be playing the guitar in the key of C for a particular song would say that to somebody who's playing the flute, and as long as they know the C scale, they'll be able to improvise within that scale, and the two instruments will work together and it'll sound really nice together. And so if we don't respect what key the music is in, then the sound of the two instruments just won't really work together. And so there is a point in music where it will become important to start to explore the different scales, and at least the major and the minor scale of each of the different notes from A, B, C, D, E, F to G, in order to really develop our musicality and understanding of the instrument, of the complexity within which we are able to create different pieces, as well as how to be able to jam or improvise and play with other musicians and play with different instruments together. So we also hear often the term octave. Now, what is an octave? Well, an octave refers to the interval from one note to another of that very same note, and that is usually, it is double or it is half its vibration. So in this case here, I'll play this middle A. We'll hear that sound. And then I'll add an octave of the same note. And so we hear this higher A now. Coming back to the lower A. So our ears can hear that it is the same notes, however it is an octave higher. It means that the pitch is higher, and when we play an octave higher, we are doubling the frequency. So each note has a specific frequency, which is defined by hertz, in which case the A on this harmonium is set to 440 hertz, which means that the next A that I'm playing is going to be 880 hertz. It's going to be doubling the vibrational frequency. Now, if I was to play an A an octave lower, then I will be halving the frequency of that other A. So I don't have it on this harmonium because it's a little one, but I would be coming down an octave and I would be playing an A that would be 220 hertz. So I can give an example here with the C. So if I find middle C here, this note is middle C. Now if I come up an octave, I'm doubling the vibration. We can hear that it's the same note, but it's higher in pitch. Coming back to the middle C. And then if I come down to a lower C, I'm going to be halving the vibration. So as we halve the vibrations, we hear these deeper resonances, deeper vibrational frequencies. And so that's what's referred to as an octave. Now, some of us are able to sing. Usually, most of us will be capable of singing 2 octaves. And if we work to really develop our voices, then we may be able to expand our range of our singing voice to about 3 octaves. And so singing from that low C to middle C to high C may be something that is, well, that's actually only 2 octaves here. From low to middle to high, that would be 2 full octaves that include the 3 C's. However, if I worked to expand my range, I might be able to add another half scale on the bottom of the lower C and another half scale on the upper end of that high C, in which case I would be getting towards 3 octaves. And that might be a really beautiful goal to work towards, developing the voice and expanding our range. Now, an octave in general, the interval of an octave is most often heard commonly when we have a male and a female singing together. Typically, the male voice is singing an octave lower than where the female voice is. And so when a man and a woman sing together, we're singing the same thing, we're singing the same notes, but the female voice is usually singing an octave higher. And so what that means also now is getting into the idea of harmony. Harmony means that we are singing two or more notes that sound really pleasing together. And obviously if the note is the same, because the interval is one octave, that means that they are clearly going to sound good together because they're the same note. So singing an octave apart is still a harmony. It's not one of the other intervals that are more commonly heard. We'll get to this in our harmony class, but we have all of the different intervals that are available from the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh harmonies within the octave. So we'll see that an octave signifies 8 whole notes. It includes some half tones as well, so there are actually 12 tones available. But the octave denotes that we have 8 intervals when we come from the low C to the middle C, or the middle C to the high C, indicating 8 different intervals that we can play with. Now, harmony means that we are playing with any of those different intervals along the way within the octave. And it's really even more fun to start to explore moving into some of the harmonies when we move into the lower octave below the fundamental tone that the melody is creating. So melody and harmony are very similar. When we say that music is comprised of pitch, melody, and rhythm, melody in this sense would also include the potential for harmony. It means melody is indicating like the dance of the notes and where they're going, moving up and down the scale, etc. And then harmony is laid over the melody. So the melody would be what we would consider the fundamental baseline of the music that is comprising the sound, the piece of music. And then harmony is added over the top. Now, sometimes we hear harmony added throughout. So when we actually sing in harmony, like purposefully in a 2 or 3 or 4 part harmony, singing in circle together, then we'll hear harmony throughout the entire piece usually. But when we listen to recorded songs, there is often harmonies added at different points in the music to add more depth to the different piece and more texture. And so this is commonly added to the chorus, for example, but it could also be added on specific phrases or points in the music to add an extra texture and another layer of depth. So when we think about melody, I like to think of it as the pitch that is moving kind of vertically, if you like. Now harmony adds this depth that we might think of as it is horizontal, in a way that it is expanding the possibility of sound into another dimension. And it adds a richness and a texture that is really very, very pleasing to our ear. So harmony is defined as 2 or more notes that sound really pleasing together. However, harmony doesn't necessarily, there is what we refer to as resonant or consonant harmony, in which case we would say that they are very pleasing to the ear. There's also dissonant harmony, which is less pleasing to the ear. And what a dissonant harmony is doing is it's building a little bit of tension into the music. So it's adding a little bit of extra feeling in order to bring up emotions within the recipient of the music, of the sound of the music. And so that's really important, because music is about evoking feeling. It's about evoking emotion. And so sometimes harmony that is dissonant is used in order to bring up these deeper seated emotions so that we can feel more deeply a specific piece of music. Interestingly, different musical cultures will use different intervals of harmony specifically in their music. And so this is why we hear very different styles of sound, very different feelings within different cultures of music. When we think to Indian music, we have all sorts of different sounds that are very uncommon to the Western musically trained ear. And it's not that they are not beautiful, these sounds, it is just that they are different and our ears are not really used to hearing them. The more that we do begin to hear them and listen to these different intervals that are less common for us, we will start to hear more beauty in them. If we move further east and listen to Arabic music, then we'll hear all sorts of different intervals that we are really not used to hearing. Both Indian and these really Eastern forms of music have quarter tones involved in them. And so Western music typically only works with whole and half tones. And when we move to a musical culture that incorporates quarter tones, now there is kind of double the amount of sounds available from which to choose to create different moods and different feelings within music. And our Western ears aren't really used to hearing that. And so it can be really, really interesting to begin with, to listen to these sounds. Sometimes we may not find them so pleasing because we're not used to them. But the more we start to listen and open to them, what we are hearing is a whole spectrum of emotion being evoked that is a lot deeper than what we are capable of expressing within the Western musical forms. And so in that way, it is a real gift what some of these different cultures are offering us through their music, because they are opening up our ears and opening up our hearts and our minds and our bodies to be able to receive, experience, and express ourselves through sound in ways that we may never have heard before or understood before. So that's the idea of harmony in a nutshell. And so I've used the term interval a lot here when it refers to harmony. So the interval simply means that we're referring to the spaces between the notes within a scale. And so if we look at the simple C major scale, which is our most common scale given and kind of the foundation from which we build and understand music, because it's the simplest scale, the C major scale, basically because it doesn't contain any sharps or flats. So it's just simply C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C that comprises the entire octave. So the interval from C to D is, well, there's one interval here. This is referred to as when D is, the note D is the second note in the scale. So this is referred to as the second interval. From C to D to E now, E represents our third note in that scale, in which case E is referred to as the third interval. When we come to F, that would be the fourth interval. G would be the fifth interval. A would be the sixth interval. B would be the seventh interval. And back to the top C, so the full octave, now we have the eighth interval representing the full octave. So we see octo, the representation of eight notes, eight tones comprised within that scale. So this is what interval really means when we use that in music. So we have what is referred to as intervals, and some of these intervals are very common. The most common intervals that we would understand within music, within the Western frame of music, simply because of all the music we've heard, we've listened to throughout our lifetime, is going to be the third and the fifth interval. And the reason for that is that these three intervals played together. So the first, which is the fundamental note, so in this case we're talking about C major scale, so we'd say that C is the root, and then when we add the third, that would be the E, so we go C, G, E, sorry, C, D, E, so E is our third interval, E, F, G, now G is our fifth, so we have our root at C, we have our third at E, and we have our fifth interval at G. All together, these three intervals, these three notes together, are comprising a harmony that is referred to as a chord. And we're probably very familiar with the term chord. So chords are played in music in order to make beautiful sounds. So here I'll demonstrate. Here is our middle C. In this case, this is our root note. Now if I add the third harmony, we hear that slightly higher harmony, and then I'm adding the fifth harmony, and now those three notes together are comprising a chord. So a chord would usually be 2 or 3 or even 4 notes, which are also harmonic intervals, played simultaneously. And so this is what is comprising a chord. When we have the opportunity to work with the major third interval, which was what we just played there in the C major chord. So the difference between what we would refer to as a major chord and a minor chord is determined by that third interval. So in this case, with the C chord, where I have my C, my E, and my G, well, this third interval here, in this case, this is a major third interval. This means that this is a major C chord, which means, as we've already mentioned, within major scales, that this is an upbeat, a happy, bright sound. Now, if I change the major third for a minor third interval, I change from a C major to a C minor. So we hear that difference. We've added a sense of moodiness, a little bit of deeper introspective melancholy. And the only thing I've done is I've shifted from the major third interval to the minor third interval, in which case I'm playing C, D sharp or E flat and G. And so that is what is comprising and making the difference between a major chord and a minor chord is our third interval, and whether we choose to use the harmonic major interval of the third or the harmonic minor. And in that way we are able to find in each of the scales quite easily what the major and minor chord is of each of those keys. Typically, we are seeing within the scope of sound healing, sound balancing, sound within a therapeutic application is yet again this idea of the fifth harmony. And so what we do see within each of the chords and the framework of every major or minor chord is that we have the root note, which is the key of the scale, in which case there I was playing C, and we see that the fifth does not change. So the fifth for the C, whether it's C major or C minor, will always be G. And so that means that that fifth interval is always present, whether I'm moving into a more moody feeling or into a really bright, upbeat feeling. The fifth harmony, the fifth interval, is this idea that continues to arise and is one of the most common intervals of harmony that we see within all of the world's musical cultures. And so when we look to all of the world's musical cultures and see that there is a commonality in this use of the fifth interval, then we know that there's something very, very special here. This fifth interval is a ratio of 2 to 3, or 2 over 3. And this is what is given to us as the golden number. And so this perfect fifth interval, it is sometimes called, it is seen present in nature and present in all things. And so the fifth harmony is something to remember to always come back to exploring, as it is a harmony that is consonant, meaning that it is harmonically beautiful, it is resonant, it is bringing balance, it is uplifting the spirit as well. And so for all of the different keys, all of the different chords, they all have a fifth interval that is worth noting. And there is an acronym that we sometimes use, which is Fairy Children Go Dancing Among Enchanting Bells. I'll say that again. Fairy children go dancing among enchanting bells. So that means we have F, C, G, D, A, E, B. Fairy children go dancing among enchanting bells. And so if we remember that acronym, then we have the opportunity to remember how to always make sure that there is a fifth interval, a fifth harmony present when we are choosing instruments, whether it is 2 crystal bowls or 2 flutes to play together, understanding how to move within different scales on a keyboard, or exploring different tones on a hang drum and a tongue drum, for example. And there's many, many, many ways in which we can hear these sounds together, and we will generally always find that there is a beautiful resonant harmony that is created. And within the scope of sound healing, this would be considered our most powerful healing fundamental harmony to use.